Hello everyone, I'm Wendy Frados, and I'll be your presenter for today's session of LinkedIn One, Building a Profile. I received my certification as a professional online networking strategist through the Career Coach Academy. My training focused exclusively on LinkedIn and keeping current with the latest job search trends and technologies in the social search. Today I'm excited to share with you all that I've learned about getting started and building a dynamic profile on LinkedIn. Let me begin by saying that there's no doubt that social recruiting is changing how recruiters do business. Just take a look at these results from JobVite's most recent social recruiting survey. I think the results are remarkable. Recruiters leveraging social media to reach candidates is at an all-time high. 92% use or plan to use social media for recruiting. 89% have made a hire through LinkedIn. And social recruiting just works better. 43% of recruiters reported an increase in candidate quality. Even if your goal is not tied to connecting with recruiters, LinkedIn is a must for anyone in career transition. Key studies show us time and again that employee referrals and networking are the #1 way employers are finding talent these days. And networking is exactly what people are doing on LinkedIn. Every week I personally hear success stories from job seekers who are finding connections on LinkedIn, and these connections are leading to their next opportunity. When it comes to business networking, you could say that LinkedIn literally owns the space. LinkedIn is essentially a place for business professionals, a place where they find each other, and a place where they'd like to be found themselves. It's a way to search through your contacts and their contacts, and as I mentioned, it's the new database for recruiters. So what exactly do you hope to accomplish when you join LinkedIn? Well, first of all, you want to share your brand. In today's world, branding is an important part of establishing an online presence, and you need to get your message in front of your audience. Another goal is to grow your network. Not superficially, but with relevant contacts. And then you need to nurture those individual relationships. LinkedIn is not just about collecting names and phone numbers. It's really about building real relationships with people. Here's how LinkedIn works. LinkedIn is based on the idea of connecting to people through degrees of separation. And LinkedIn sorts users in your network this way. People who are your friends or your colleagues, people who you've invited to connect with you, or people who have invited you to connect with them. These people are in your first degree network. And you'll see a first in a box after their name. So as you can see here, Jason Alba is a first degree connection of mine. People to whom you're not directly connected, but your first degree connections are directly connected to, are in your second degree network. So you can see here I'm connected to Deb by the second degree. Deb and I have all these first degree connections in common. Now, people your second degree connections are directly connected to. So in other words, people Deb is connected to outside of her first degree connections are my third degree connections. And a third degree connection is a very weak connection on LinkedIn. Outside of that, users are not connected. So today I'm going to talk about how to build a successful profile on LinkedIn. And it's important to keep in mind two goals. First of all, search engine optimization, sometimes called SEO for short. And that's about what keywords you have in your profile and where they are placed. As far as optimizing or increasing your chances of being found on LinkedIn, the goal is to have your name come up high in the search results when someone types keywords or keyword phrases into the LinkedIn search box. Phrases like engineer, software, business developer. The question is, will you come up on the first page of their search results? Will you come up on the 4th page? Will you come up on the 10th page? Now, the other thing that you want to achieve with your profile is that you want to engage the reader. When the reader comes into a profile, and when I say reader, it could be a recruiter, an HR manager, a colleague, whoever it is, you want them to look at your profile and be engaged. So just like a resume gets a 30-second look, the same thing goes for a LinkedIn profile. And you want to make sure that the things that jump out at the reader will have significant impact on your credibility and your brand. Recently, I had feedback from 2 candidates who revised and updated their profiles on LinkedIn after attending this workshop. The first said he began receiving calls the very next week for the first time ever after revising his profile, and he had some interviews lined up. The second candidate didn't really do much outreach, but even so, after revising her profile, she was contacted and had interviews and an offer within a few weeks. So I'm more convinced than ever that an engaging profile is the foundation for success on LinkedIn. Let's go out to LinkedIn now and take a look at building a profile. If you haven't yet set up an account on LinkedIn, it's as simple as going to www.linkedin.com and setting up an account with a username and a password, just the same as you would do when you register on any website. It's free and it's easy to do. Now here's where you'll begin building your own profile. Under the item Profile on the top menu, simply click on Edit Profile. Now, one of the first things to notice about the LinkedIn profile is the prominence of the photo, and that makes it very important. Zooming in on the face helps you see a person's features, and if I meet you for lunch or at a meeting, I'll be able to recognize who you are. You want to look professional, but you also want to look friendly and approachable. There's no need to pay a professional to take this photo. I had a friend take mine with her digital camera. Sometimes people in the workshops that I teach are a little wary about the photo, and then they ask, do I really need to have a photo on LinkedIn? My answer is yes. Statistics show that people who have a photo on LinkedIn are 7 times more likely to have their profile viewed in general than people who don't have a photo. I think it's just human nature to be interested in what a person looks like. Next, I want to call attention to the headline. And this appears right underneath your name. The headline is where you make it clear what you do. It's like your 5-second bumper sticker or your value proposition. It answers the question, what can you do for me? So here's my headline, Career Transition Strategist. I'll teach you how to navigate the online job search. It sounds simple, but my job incorporates so many different skill sets, training, coaching, teaching, website development. It took me a while to pull everything together and to come up with just a simple value proposition. And it's likely that for you too, your formal title doesn't really tell the story of all that you do. The headline also ties in with the idea of creating a brand for yourself, something memorable that makes you stand out from so many other people who do the same type of work that you do. Here's an exercise that you can use to start the process of writing a headline for yourself. Fill in the answer to these 2 statements. I help people buy blank. And I help companies buy blank. One of the best ways to learn about creating a dynamic value proposition is to attend our online workshop, Creating Your Brand. And you can find that on the workshop calendar on IMPAXIS. The other thing you want to remember about the headline is to incorporate keywords into it. So here are some of my keywords. Career Transition Strategist, online job search. The reason I incorporate these keywords is so that when users, hiring managers, recruiters search for people who do my kind of work, they'll come across my profile. And the same is true for you. Whether you're a senior sales representative, a business developer, a corporate trainer, account executive, whatever you are, you want to implement your most important keywords into your title. Now, another piece of real estate on your profile is your activity window. And you can see that better from the view that somebody else would have coming into my profile. So I'm not in my edit view anymore. I'm in the view that you would have when you come into my profile. And when you come in here, under activity, you can see that I've recently posted an article. When I post something to my activity field, it not only updates on my profile, it also shows my update on the home page of all my connections, just as I see updates of my connections on my home page. So let me show you. Here's my home page. And when I come in here and begin to scroll down, I see the updates of my connections. It's the first thing I look at when I land on my own home page. Here's my update. And this is a great place to communicate with people, like, comment, share. As someone in career transition, it's particularly important to keep updating your activity with articles and items of interest to keep your name in front of people and to keep your visibility constant. I'm going to go into more detail about how to post the articles to your activity window in the second LinkedIn workshop, Networking and Communication. For now, let's go back to the Edit Profile view and talk about another field. And actually, as I look at this, the better place to view the current company field and really understand it, I think, is from the View Profile. So in other words, when you come into someone's profile, what you see underneath the industry, underneath the headline, you see the current company. You see previous companies, you see their education. These are all active links. So here's an active link to Impact Group, my current company. The current company field is a subject of discussion for people in career transition who don't have a current company. There are several alternatives here. First of all, you could leave the field blank, and that's a viable option. Another way you can deal with the field is to use a phrase like in transition or seeking next opportunity in the company, in the current company field. So here's how you would work with that. When I come in to edit my experience, and this is where you're listing all your companies and your experience in each one, when you click to add a position, company name is a required field. So you can see how that could be a problematic field if you don't have a current company. And that's why I make the suggestion in transition, or seeking next opportunity. Now for title, use your generic title. In other words, you might be a project manager, a project coordinator, business developer, whatever it is. It's still your title. Whether you're currently employed or not, that's who you are. That's what you do. Time period. I currently work here. Now you're offered the opportunity to update your headline. Remember, we just talked about your headline and your branding, and they're suggesting maybe you want to say project manager at seeking next opportunity. Well, no, I don't want to say that because I don't want to use my headline to announce my employment status. So I'm going to take that away. I want to use my headline for good branding and good keywords. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a description of what I do. In other words, you know, whatever it is. I have expertise in technical project management and information technology. Whatever your expertise is, and then go ahead and save. Now, what's the advantage of going through this exercise rather than leaving the field completely blank? The advantage is that if you enter a title in the current company field, project manager, business developer, whatever your title is, you give yourself the opportunity to come up in as many searches as possible. So in other words, if someone is searching for a project manager in the title field when they're doing their search, you're one of the people that'll come up because that's what you have in your current title field. Recruiters most often search on keywords. So let me just give you an example of this. And I'm just going to take you directly to the Advanced People search. When recruiters come in to look for people to fill positions, they'll typically use this keyword field. And they'll put in up to 7 keywords. Important keywords to describe the people that they're looking for. So, for example, if I'm looking for a financial person, financial analyst to be more specific, somebody with, let's go back here because I had one filled in. Somebody with accounting skills, risk management skills. I can put all my keywords in here. Now, of course, I can refine the search by geography, by company name, industry, years of experience, whatever it is. I could also use the current title field. And I did talk about, you know, when you do enter a title into your current title field and you're in transition, if somebody fills out this field, you will come up in the search results. But it just depends who's doing the searching, because some recruiters don't even want to use the current title field. They'd prefer to use the keyword field and describe the person with the specific keywords that they're looking for. So it's kind of complicated, but let's just see what it looks like when I go ahead and just use the keyword field. And here come my search results. And why did these people come up the highest in my search results? Well, there's lots of theories on how this works. Honestly, no one's 100% sure because LinkedIn is very protective of their algorithm. But we do know that the order of the search results is determined in part by the profile, the activity, and the connections of the person who's doing the searching. We do know it's important to have your important keywords sprinkled throughout your profile. Financial, in this case, risk analysis, accounting. And you can see in my search, people who I'm connected to tend to come up higher in my search results. That's why one tactic for appearing high in a recruiter's search results is to connect with a recruiter who's prominent in your industry or specialty. Now let's go back to my profile and take a look at some of the other sections. We've gotten off on a keywords tangent here. So now here we are back at the profile. Taking a look at the summary. And the reason the keywords are important, remember, you want to sprinkle them into every part of your profile. So let's take a look at the summary because actually this is the place where so many people miss the boat on LinkedIn. There's just so many profiles out there that have only a few sentences and really don't say much at all. Or some people just copy and paste their resume here. But you can see I use my summary to tell my story, and this is very different than copying and pasting a resume. You know, when you apply for a job opportunity these days, the first thing that the recruiter or the hiring manager often does after reading your resume is hop out to LinkedIn and look at your profile. So you want them to see something different than what they saw in your resume. And you want to have something that will really engage their interest. Okay, here's my summary. And I really built this, I think, quite effectively by using PAR stories. If you've been working on your resume, you've heard about PAR stories. PAR stories tell your story by using 3 different segments. What I mean is PAR is an acronym for P, problem or a situation in which events occur, A, actions taken in response to a problem or situation, and R, results measured or benefit to the company. PAR, tell your story, problem, action, result. And here's, for example, let's just start at the beginning of my summary where I introduce myself. As someone who rode with the first wave of online librarians, I've used my research skills to stay abreast of the impact of the Internet on job search and career transition. I received my master's degree when the online job search first exploded in popularity, and that's been my passion ever since. As I launch into telling more of what I've done, here's a problem I faced. When I began in the career transition industry, it was shifting services to an e-delivery model. What is the action I took? My challenge was to design and deliver 35 hours plus of online workshops. What was the result of this activity? The workshops covering the core curriculum were cited by clients and participants as key differentiators in our services. So, use the summary to communicate your value proposition. Be sure it's simple, lots of white space, lots of bullets. That's how people read online. And be sure that your important keywords are sprinkled throughout. Career transition, Internet, librarian, job search. Because remember, as we saw, keywords are one of the ways that you bring yourself to the top in search results. experience. More of the same in terms of incorporating keywords, telling more of your story, using those PARs, and make it simple, clean, easy to read. I've worked to make our career transition, relocation, and talent development services top ranking in our industry. And here's a few of the ways that I've done that. Now, a great way of enhancing your story is to add portfolio pieces, videos, presentations. This is a very, very powerful way to showcase your work. You may have done something that will work very well here, or you might want to think about putting something together now specifically for this purpose. I'm going to talk next about recommendations, and I think it's best to look at this once again as if I was someone just coming into my profile, taking a look, you can actually see a few recommendations connected to my specific jobs that I've held. But if I scroll all the way down, I can see all of my recommendations. And I want to remind you that recommendations related to your work and your experience will add significant impact to your profile, so don't overlook this. You want to have a good mixture of recommendations from customers, colleagues, managers, people that you've worked with on different projects in various positions. You know, recommendations are, I would say, are my favorite part of my profile because the people who recommended me are so articulate. And because they witnessed my work, they often ended up describing what I do in ways I would have never thought to describe it myself. And I think that these recommendations add a great deal of credibility to my story. Here's another idea. Take the gems from your recommendations and incorporate them into your own summary. So in other words, you could even use a quote from one of your recommendations and say something like, I've been described as the go-to person for advice and guidance around information research, as well as the impact of the internet on job search and career management. You know, take those quotes and incorporate them. So how do you ask people to write a recommendation for you? When you're under Edit Profile, you want to scroll to Recommendations, click on the Edit pencil icon, and then you'll notice under your recommendations, you can click on Manage Visibility, and here's a place where you manage recommendations you've received. It's also a place where you can make a recommendation for someone. Okay, and let's go back to that. It's also a place where you can ask to be recommended. Back to the profile, I want to talk about another feature on LinkedIn, and this feature is called endorsements. So let's take a look. okay, these are people who have endorsed my skills. And skill endorsements are a way for you to endorse your connection skills and expertise with just one click. You don't need to ask for a skill endorsement in order to receive one. On the positive side, it's a nice thing to do for someone. It brings your name to mind when somebody sees that you've endorsed them. But please remember that recommendations really do hold much more weight than endorsements at this point on LinkedIn, because recommendations are a way for employers and hiring managers to gain some real insight into the work that you've done. Back to the edit profile screens, as we scroll down here, make sure we take a look at everything that's available. Education, it's pretty self-explanatory. Additional information, advice for contacting Wendy. When I put my email address in there, that only shows to my first degree connections. And I do want to draw your attention to this little link to customizing visibility. Because the categories within your profile, you know, recommendations, groups, companies you're following, you have the option to control visibility settings on everything that you do on LinkedIn. When I click there, it takes me to my privacy and settings, and I can also get to them just simply by clicking under my profile picture on privacy and settings. It's going to take me to the same place. It's going to ask me for my passwords. This is for security reasons. And this is a place where you can take a look, review your account, review, as I said, all your privacy controls and your settings on LinkedIn. And the one category that I'd like you to draw your attention to today, since we're working on the profile, under privacy controls, there's a link to turn on or off your activity broadcast. Now, your activity broadcasts are activity updates. So in other words, when you, and this is something different, it's a little complicated. This doesn't have anything to do with your activity feed when I talked about sharing the articles and so forth. This doesn't have anything to do with that. This has to do with actually letting people know when you change your profile, when you make recommendations or follow companies. So I leave this unchecked. The reason I do that is because I make a lot of changes to my profile. And you're going to be making a lot of changes to your profile while you're working on it. And what I don't want to happen is to have all my connections know, Wendy just changed her headline. Wendy just added her experience. Wendy just, you know, did this and that to her profile. Because that's a lot of what I call noise on somebody's activity feed. They're not really interested that I'm playing around with all these things on my profile. So it's actually just to be polite. It's an etiquette. It's LinkedIn etiquette that I won't have to clutter up their feed with all that kind of information. And so that's something that I would suggest that you do. Keep this unchecked. You don't need to let people know when you make changes to your profile when you're working on it. So let's go back to the profile. Just a few more things here. Just want to point out that there are all kinds of additional categories that you'll want to explore on your own. Here, if you looked on the right-hand side, projects that you're working on, language, organizations, honors and awards, patents, certifications, volunteering. Explore these additional categories and add the information as you see fit. Something I haven't mentioned, it's in such tiny print here, but it is important, and that's your LinkedIn public profile. So what is a LinkedIn public profile? Let's click on Edit to take a look. Your public profile is a way for you to control what people see when they search for you on any of the search engines, Google, Yahoo, Bing. Setting your profile as public, which you can do right here, this means that your LinkedIn profile will come up when people search for you on the internet. So in other words, when people go online and they go to Google and they type in Wendy Frados, one of the first things that they're going to see about me is a link to my profile, my LinkedIn profile. And I like that because it contributes to creating a strong professional presence for me on the web. This is what I want people to see when they look me up on the internet. You can also customize your profile URL, and to do that, you simply click here. You can see mine is customized because to get to my profile, you simply click on www.linkedin.com/in/Wendy Frados, my name. And this is something, when you set it up this way, you can use this on your business card or on your email signature or on your resume. And then the final thing I want to mention on the profile is groups, because that's something that shows up on your profile. Probably best to look at these from the viewer's point. And when somebody goes to view my profile, they see all the groups that I belong to, or the groups that I've designated as visible. That's another privacy setting that you can use. And I'm going to talk about LinkedIn group strategy in LinkedIn Part 2, Networking and Communicating. But just wanted you to take a look at the groups here and remind you that there's a great advantage to joining groups on LinkedIn, and that is that you can communicate with anyone in a group you belong to without becoming a connection. So it's really an awesome and free way to communicate with your peers. And if you haven't yet joined our IMPAXIS group, you can simply come up to the top and search for it up in the search box, or you can join it from the IMPAXIS website under Community. I encourage everyone to join this group. It's for IMPAXIS candidates and alumni. We also have recruiters and hiring managers in the group who wish to connect with our IMPAXIS candidates. We have very active discussions going on. Job opportunities are shared. And once again, you have the ability to connect with thousands of people here as if they were your first degree connections. So it's just a great way to get started with groups and get your feet wet. Well, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's session of LinkedIn Part 1, Building a Profile. And I encourage you to join me for LinkedIn Part 2, Networking and Communication. In that session, I'll discuss how to grow your network and how to nurture relationships on LinkedIn. Hope to see you then.